So welcome, thank you everybody for coming on this fairly grey looking Wednesday afternoon in Milton Keynes. The theme today is really retention and how the Apprenticeship Levy, particularly at the management and leadership level, is being used as a retention tool during the kind of retention crisis that industries and the economy faces. And I'm really delighted to be joined today by Cranfield colleagues who will join in part of the discussion and facilitation, as well as one of our clients in Aeon who can talk about their kind of personal story through this journey. But we'll kick off by just introducing who's facilitating today. We'll look at this notion of the art of the possible with the new format of the Senior Leader Apprenticeship. And then we've got a little facilitated exercise to get us thinking, to get us contributing in terms of values-led leadership and how that impacts retention. And then we'll look at Aeon's story and the story of others in mobilizing and optimizing apprenticeships in this space and what can be done to really make the most of embedding a leadership development program. So I hope that's everything in one place. We'll go straight into who we are, and I'm heading up the team in terms of the portfolio and working with different employers to make this client experience count for them. My colleague Nathan is the lead on the project side and is facilitating today. So thank you, Nathan, for pushing all the buttons. Lauren is going to be joining us at 2 o'clock to talk about that Aeon story. And then really delighted to have David facilitate for us the practice-based exercise. So that's the team today. And I'll just kick off really with the kind of start of this project and the genesis for this piece of work, which for Cranfield was very much led by engaging the market in the future for the Senior Leader Apprenticeship. And this project, through structured discussions across a number of sectors, really helped to surface some of the drivers for learning and development at that point in time. And this was across autumn 2020, when we were all locked in or out and COVID was really impacting the economy, organizations and people. And some of the kind of themes that really surfaced around the levy being more important, the scale of disruption to core business practice, whilst also, global firms trying to adapt to the impact of COVID. It was absolutely massive seismic effects. And we really wanted to look at how this was changing the landscape for leadership development. And some of these drivers, weren't uncommon or unfamiliar to us as learning and development professionals. Organizations really wanting to drive and embed change, whereas individuals with their own self-interests, first and foremost, really interested in the outcome, the end products from a leadership development experience. And the big change really in how this hybrid delivery model from providers like Cranfield's, business schools, universities, was really starting to drive this notion of a better way. And by live online, we mean interactive sessions, breakout rooms, etc., to bring the classroom to people. And we also started to kind of get a sense of changes in the way that learning and development was working and the pace and cadence that managers and leaders were now expecting from this type of delivery. And then finally, starting to really get a sense of where the Senior Leader Apprenticeship would go, addressing a new potential segment. And we'll look at those changes next. So this dashboard of sorts has held us in good stead. Today, it's the art of the possible, but it's really helped to kind of navigate through some of the complexity of change to a competency framework approach like an apprenticeship. But some of the big kind of fundamental drivers of this change project are really in how the apprenticeship fundamentally works. So the duration has been curtailed, the funding band has also been squeezed, but this mandate, removing the masters as a mandated feature, presents really the change and opportunity that we'll discuss today. And a couple of those other kind of neighbouring themes are also really important. The Institute for Apprenticeships really wanting to drive the employer behaviour at the table of this apprenticeship and to get employers more involved and part of the experience, and also more of a commercial flavour to some of the deliverables in these strategic business plans rather than essay or assignment based assessment. Now, on the other side, in terms of substantive change to that competency framework, some new themes on the boards, and those that you can't help but look beyond COVID too. The consultation closed as COVID was impacting Western Europe, and so we see people leadership dialing up, well-being being really scrutinized, and at the other end of the sort of spectrum, how global and macro trends impact individuals and their organizations. And with all of this married together, the consultation projects, we really started to see different populations perhaps start to use this apprenticeship in the future, and so different organizational development themes that large organizations were thinking of and had on the table in terms of these trending themes. And this is that competency frameworks, the new competency framework for the apprenticeship. It's obviously a leadership development program, so you find what you would expect, but a real sense of that authentic leadership style being driven. The people leadership aspect being one of the most compelling areas of change, and an entirely new coaching and mentoring requirement within that. And then really the kind of staple for commercial acumen in strategy and everything under the hood there. Again, another kind of constant that we would expect to see in this type of program. And so what we undertook in this design journey was to really consider how this type of approach could be worked. We still wanted to fulfill a number of those requirements that employers surfaced and learners expressed interest in. And so this new coaching element wrapped right around the program and enabling some performance monitoring. But a lot of the really kind of rich work of leadership development still being delivered through that most compelling channel in face-to-face across these really kind of core personal development, leadership, organizational behavior drivers. Whereas this very broad constellation of commercial acumen, real appetite from the market for live online and using smarter and working harder this type of channel. And I'm sure all providers experienced the same in 2020, 2021. But whereas, this is a more exec ed approach, we're really relying upon a much more commercial feel to performance monitoring. So whilst there is some written work, there's also the chance to pitch those ideas, and that ladder into an organizational exec review with a panel made up from the organization. And all of this really intended to simulate that endpoint assessment phase that you see on the right, with the learner completely independently producing that strategic business proposal and then going to an external assessor to undertake that final presentation, questioning and challenge. And all of that, within a much higher tempo, 15-month periods and then 5 months for that endpoint assessment. One of the areas, obviously, that we also wanted to focus our efforts on, and also the kind of experimental theme that David will cover, was this area of health and well-being. So this well-being theme had seen quite a lot of extra work and attention in the new competency framework. And we were really keen to work on a pilot in this space that could allow us to experiment as practitioners. And we're using heart rate variants, heart rate monitors to kind of underpin some of this work, and then plugging in on some of these themes that you can see around well-being, nutrition and stress, and high performance. And this, at this stage, really is a pilot, an add-on to the apprenticeship rather than being integrated. But as we really get those findings, we'll look to integrate this fully into the apprenticeship moving forwards. And then this is kind of the project checklist of sorts. So you've got some of the outcomes, you've got some of the program dynamics with organizations that we're working with. But I think I'll pause for breath now, open it up to the room and hand over to you, David, to kick off our exercise.
Thanks very much, Alistair. I'm sure there'll be some questions for Alistair based on what he's just said, so please don't lose those. If you're thinking of anything, please jot it down. What I was going to do for this session was to involve us in a discussion around talent development, because this is a program, as Alistair says, very much aimed at executive education. It's a long term program. It's a big commitment for any employer to think about putting an employee on this program. Therefore, you want to make sure the best people are going to be involved in this. I'm not going to go through about how you might identify that talent, but what I wanted to do is share some of my experiences of what I've found when I've run talent development programs in the past. Please do unmute yourselves and show your video, because I don't really want to talk to myself. I'd far rather run this as something that is a bit more interactive. So firstly, talent development. In all the programs that I've delivered on talent development, there's 3 concerns that I regularly hear from the employer when they're talking to me about a talent development program that either they want to run, or one that's in flight at the moment, or one that has been previously run. And these are these. As soon as you develop them, they leave. They're off. It's a real worry. I'll put all this investment into them, and it's not just the money, it's the time away from the business. As soon as they develop, they're going to leave. That's one of the biggest concerns. The other one that I hear very regularly from employers when they've had that experience of a talent program is the minute you tell somebody your talent, they kind of sit back and go, right, great, smashing, just bring it on. What are you going to teach me? And there's that sense of them wanting to be spoon-fed rather than, yes, you are talent, therefore actually I expect you to really drive this yourself. I expect you to make the most of this. But employers say their common reaction is that it generates this shift in the psychological contract to, yeah, I'm great, I'm amazing, so bring it on. Yeah, I deserve it. Yeah. Third one I hear is that when people come back from a course that's around talent development, they automatically expect promotion. Now, I can see some people smiling on screen. Do any of these resonate with you? And are there any others that you've heard? Like I said, I really don't want to talk to myself today.
Sometimes we get that, how much time will they be away from doing their day job?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that it's a concern that you're taking time away from the business. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great one, Sarah. Thank you. Any others, or any of these particularly resonate?
Hi, David. The second one, they expected to be promoted soon.
Yeah.
I've come across that, as well as the spoon-fed. As soon as we told young people that they have a future and talented and potential, they seem to let go and don't try as hard as they would usually.
Yeah, that's great. Can you say a bit more about this, like letting go and not trying so hard?
So I'm from hospitality background, so we recognize young talent, and we would do development plans and teach them the hard skills as long as they have the softer skills. And then once we put them into some sort of learning platform for future, and they see that they have access to perhaps senior managers or more information or all those things that comes with the certain authority, they don't work as hard as they would or they used to. And the responsibility or the output isn't as great as it used to be.
Yeah, and you mentioned that exposure to more senior people.
Correct.
Right? That's part of it. Is great. I'm being exposed to more senior people, therefore automatically I'm more important. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And what's your first name, by the way? Because I
Jakub. Jakub.
Jakub. Super. Thank
Yes.
you very much, Jakub. Anybody else? Which of these resonate? Any others you've heard?
I certainly hear from a kind of consulting perspective, the fear of the exit, the swift exit after the program is complete, which it's often presented, but it's kind of rarely evidenced as to how often that happens. If it happens to a couple of really high potential individuals, is it a kind of risk that can be monitored, measured? To what degree is it a fear just in and of itself? Yeah.
Okay, super. Thanks, Alistair. Okay, as we move through, so I'm going to touch on all of these themes again in relation to what I have seen happen and in relation to the apprenticeship program. So the next thing I want to just branch out into is the role of values. So we hear so much these days about values, and people talk about the values an organization holds is absolutely crucial to how much input people will give, how much it whether it retains people. And so many organizations spend a lot of money clarifying what their values are, and go to great lengths to create banners and posters and little objects that sit on desks that remind people of what our values are. Is it actually really important? Does it affect the amount of commitment that you get from people? So to start that conversation off, I've got a bit of research that was done by Coos, Posner and Smith. They looked at the level of people's commitment in relation to how clear they were on values. But they looked at two parameters. They looked at how clear people were with regard to their own values. And they also looked at how clear the organization's own values were to that person. So how well did that person understand their own set of values? How well did that person understand that the values that the organization held? And then they measured all of that against the commitment that that person had to the organization. So it's fairly a no-brainer that if somebody has a high understanding of their own personal values and has a high understanding of the organization's values, they can instantly see how they match. They can see how they interlink, and they can get that really strong sense of, should I be here? Is this the right place for me to be? Am I home? So they recognise that if somebody was clear on both, they could see those connections. So it was a no-brainer that the top score was 6.26, that there was a high, that was the highest level of commitment. It's also a no-brainer that if somebody has low understanding of their own personal values and doesn't really understand the organisation's values, they can't see a connection. They can't get that sense of, am I in the right place? Should I be here? Is this going to be right for me? So therefore, the lowest level of commitment is probably going to be when people don't understand their own values, don't understand their organisation's values. This doesn't really take a lot to work out, does it? The really interesting part of their research for me was when you looked at whether people were more committed if they understood their own values or whether it was because they understood the organisation's values. Anybody want to take a guess?
I'd probably go personal values.
Thank you, Sarah. Tell us what you're thinking as to why that might be more important.
Because I have high personal values.
Yeah.
So therefore, my aim in life is always be the best that I can be, regardless, to a degree, not completely. I wouldn't go and work for a company that, you know, we didn't care about people. But yeah, I think for me, I don't know, that's probably why I would go personal values.
Okay, super, thank you. Anybody else?
David, it's David here.
Hi, David.
I think there is a confusion in the definition of value itself. I think that could be one of the reasons. You know, the matching exercise which you mentioned about your own personal values, and even the word value is used, you know, in a different way. So I think that has caused a lot of confusion.
It's very, very subjective. Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially because of, you know, we are in a pluralistic, you know, society, and everybody's values anyway has to be respected. So why do I have to match with your value if I have all my value? And then, you know, even the very exercise of matching, is that a valid approach? Why can't I live with my value, you live with your value? I think that has caused a lot of confusion in people.
Yeah, okay. I'll come back to that, Darrell, if I may. Anybody else? Okay, I'll put you out of your misery. So the interesting thing was that if people had high clarity and understanding of what the organization's values were, i.e., you know, the posters were on the walls, the leaflets were everywhere, that didn't actually impact on their commitment as much as people who understood their own personal values, what they personally stood for. If people really understood what they stood for, but the organization's values weren't clear, it didn't matter. They were still more committed than those people who didn't understand their own personal values, who couldn't sit and name them. They couldn't say, as when Sarah, you were talking, you were saying, you know, you've got high personal values, you understand what they are, you know what they feel like for you. And to your point, Darrell, about values are very, very subjective, is absolutely, if we talk about the value of, for sake of argument, ambition, what ambition means to you as an individual is very different to what it means to me. There'll still be certain things I will do or certain things I won't do that impact on my sense of my value of ambition. And those things will be different to what you might do or not do in regard to that value of ambition. We all make sense of them for ourselves, but so many people don't sit and think about it, don't really take that time to reflect on what is important to me. The interesting thing about why it's people with higher clarity of personal values will be more committed, even if they don't know the organization's own values, is basically because we will all work it out for ourselves. Sarah, you said that comment about the certain organizations I would never go and work for. There's certain things they did, I wouldn't go and work for them. Organizations don't have to have things on the walls on posters. They don't have to have it on leaflets. You can often get a very strong sense of an organization's values or even a department's values just by walking in and starting to talk to people and hearing about the things they do, the things they're involved in. We get a strong sense of organizations from the news, the media, of things that they've been involved in, certain acts that they've committed. It's all over social media, and it says to us what that organization's values are. If you think about the experience we've had during the pandemic, the number of stories where organizations have gone the extra mile to help out customers or to protect vulnerable staff, etc. They're those little stories that say to you something about the organization, which might be completely different to anything that they've got published on their walls inside. And I'm sure every single one of us has had that experience of walking into a department in our own organization and talking to people for a few minutes and coming out afterwards and saying to our friends and colleagues, I'd never go and work there. And sometimes you can't put your finger on it, but it just doesn't feel right. You just feel like, oh, I just wouldn't fit in. So that sense of our understanding our own personal values is really, really important. That's one of the key things for us about this program is why we put so much emphasis on people understanding themselves as leaders, so that they can understand why they want to be committed to the organization, help define where they can be committed to the organization. So when it comes to talent development, and around that sense of whether I leave and I don't leave, at the end of it is, if people have really spent time reflecting on what's important to them, what drives them, what gets them out of bed in the morning, they're more likely to start to recognize whether or not that's present in the organization they're working for. Are there any comments or questions at this point?
If I may ask, David,
yes.
how do you define value? I don't mean to be personal, honestly, but is there any universal definition?
So I'm not sure about a universal definition that I would trot out in terms of what I would say about clarification of personal values. For me, values is clarified by what I've got that strong sense of what is important to me, or what I will do and I won't do. It's got there's a real resonance with ethics as well, but it's more like my personal set of ethics as to what I will consider unreasonable behavior. Sometimes when I've talked to people about values, people get stuck because they kind of can't articulate what their value is for them.
Yeah.
But when you then start to say to somebody, well, what are the certain things you would never do in work? Or if somebody did it in work, you'd be horrified. Or if somebody did something in work, you'd be super impressed. You'd be really.
Yeah.
When you start to talk about the actions, you see people do things, you hear people say things. That's when you get a strong sense of what my values are, the things I will do, won't do, be impressed by, etc. I sometimes say to people rather flippantly, get a copy of Hello magazine, start flicking through it and read some of the stories of celebrities. And if you find yourself going, ooh, ouch, it's hitting on your values.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, you mentioned ethics earlier. I think that is the center of what value means to me. For me, value means something I value, something valuable to me. And originally, I think when I see value, I always expected a moral thing next to it, so that it reads clearly, moral value.
Yeah.
And then I think you'll start tracking in the same direction in every conversation. I think that clarity requires in the definition. I think it's when we center in value of human being as an individual, as collectively, as a society, then you have to really bring that word moral. And then the definition will be more clear, honestly.
And it's that thing about personal morals, because you made the point about them being very subjective. They always are and always will be. Our personal morals, our personal ethics and therefore our personal values. And I think that's one of the reasons that people do get stuck on this, because unless I've really spent time thinking about my values and what that means to me in terms of what am I drawn to, what pushes me away from something, what will I always do, what will I feel bad about if I don't do, unless I've spent really that time reflecting, I can then be quite concerned about the subjectivity of it and therefore how it might look to other people. And if it's okay, I'm just going to come on to that subject now. So I did a very long-running talent development program with a very large financial services firm. And going back to that thing is, as soon as you tell them they're supposed to be spoon-fed, for me, the line management involvement was absolutely crucial. That the line managers had to be involved in the talent identification, so they could talk to that person and say, this is why I've identified you for this program, but equally, this is what I expect from you. This is what I expect you to give to the program. This is what I expect you to bring back. So as Alistair said, one of the key pieces in this apprenticeship program is a strategic business proposal. So for me, having line managers involved at the start, talking about that piece and expecting that you're going to come back and you're going to do something that's really going to support us as an organization. That's a crucial part, to have those people involved right at the very, very start. These are the two pieces. As soon as you develop them, they're going to leave. The financial services firm that I worked with, for them, it was a big risk to put people on a talent development program because, yeah, they could go. Actually, over 90% of people who've been on the program stayed, even though only about 60% got promoted. What was fascinating for me when I was doing this program was the number of people who at the end of the program would start to talk about how actually I'm in the right role, but probably for another couple of years, but they could really articulate why they were in the right role. One thing that's not on this, because this slide is about what you hear managers say, that's in the development they're going to leave. One of the big concerns for people on talent development programs was they were being pushed. They were being pushed into stepping up. There's an expectation on me to be ambitious. There's an expectation on me that I'm going to look for the next level up. And that bothered them because they were saying, I'm not entirely sure if I want it. Yeah? Or they couldn't see where their next role in the organization was. And a great talent development program should be one that enables people to articulate either this is what my next role does look like and this is why, and this is what I would give to it, or actually articulate this is why the one I'm in at the moment is the right one. This is why it's really good for me, and I am ambitious, and I'm ambitious and clear enough to tell you why I should stay in this role another 2 years. So that sense of being able to articulate what was important to somebody, that was a really key piece for a talent development program. And also to then say, right, I want to stay in this role, but I want something else. And a lot of the people, they weren't promoted, but when you talked to them, they talked about having wider responsibilities, or they were involved in richer activities. They were involved in projects that got them to see other parts of the business. So it wasn't always about going up, up, up. And so much about talent development is often thought about, it's all about helping people go up, up, up. And it's not, it's about, for me anyway, it's about making sure that you've got great people who contribute to your organization in the best way. The other thing that was important, though, was if you're going to get that kind of reaction is, what I learned from working with this firm was that having an understanding of the reality of the workplace was absolutely crucial. So a bit of that is about expectation settings in terms of, right, I've got 24 people in this room with me for the next few days. There are not 24 senior jobs at the end of it. The reality in your workplace is there's a limited number. So what are you going to do? What do you want? What else is available to you in the organization? And there were a lot of people who came on that talent development program who would talk about being at a crossroads. They knew they wanted something different, but they couldn't really articulate it. And that there was a sense of, I'm just going to go and work for somebody else. I just want something different. That's why at the end of the program, over 90% of them stayed. Because a lot of the people on the program realized, actually, if I look at the reality of my workplace, and I'm able to start networking in and finding out more about what's going on in other departments, I'm able to start connecting with other people, I can actually find what I want in this organization. I don't have to go outside and leave. And the firm I work with, they absolutely acknowledge after a while that, yeah, those people who did leave as a result of going on the program were the ones who would have left anyway, but at least they left in a better way. So that's why for us, that connection to the workplace and the apprenticeship program is crucial. Just going back to the subject of personal values, why do you think it's difficult to talk about personal values?
I think people feel they'll be judged.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anything else? Any other reasons why people find talking about values difficult?
Well, you said it's personal. We don't necessarily want to share what's dear to us, what's close to us.
Yeah, it's personal. I might want to keep it confidential. Yeah. Any others?
It might not meet other people's expectations.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very similar to being judged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. You've seen my slide, haven't you? People don't like not everybody likes to talk about themselves. They can feel it's a bit I'm blowing my own trumpet, and I might be sounding a bit arrogant. They don't like to do that. That's okay. Very much it's driven by, but what will other people think of me? What are other people's expectations of me if I say this? And the two that I heard all the time from this is that if people don't say that people or families or friends is one of their values, then they worry that they're going to be judged as a bad person. Yeah. And that any value that was related to money was a dirty word. So you could talk about security of your job as being a personal value, and people would feel really uncomfortable sometimes talking about that, because security of job seems to mean, well, that's how much I get paid, isn't it? And therefore it's money. And I'm really shallow if I say money's important to me. So it's not an easy thing for people to talk about, but absolutely, we will get people to talk about it. And guess what? I'm going to get you to do this. So I'm going to give you 2 questions. Nathan is going to put us in a couple of breakout rooms. I think we've got enough people to have 2 breakout rooms, please, Nathan. And 2 questions. What makes you get out of bed in the morning and go to work? And the second one is, what makes you stay at your organisation? So we'll give you, I think, about 10 minutes or so in your breakout rooms to have a conversation about the things that make you get out of bed in the morning and go to work, and the things that make you stay at your organisation. And we're going to ask you to share on Mentimeter. So I hope you've got your phone handy, or you can open another window on your computer and use Mentimeter. It's very, very easy. Just type in www.menti.com and it will open up a screen straight away where you input that 8-figure code, and you'll have those questions there. So you don't even have to write them down. And if you do that, we can then put your answers anonymously in a word cloud. Thank you for sharing the Mentimeter link, Nathan, in the chat. That's very helpful. And the reason I ask you 2 questions, what makes you get out of bed in the morning, go to work, but then what makes you stay at your organisation, is they can be 2 very, very different things. A friend of mine was once bemoaning to me about his relationship difficulties. And I asked him, so what's what's stopping you leaving? What's stopping you leaving? And he, nothing, absolutely nothing's stopping me leaving. It's dreadful, it's terrible. I said, okay, so what's making you stay? And then there was this horribly long silence, and he just went, oh, I'm not sure. I said, well, there you go, that's the thing to work on. So they can sound like two very similar questions, but they are actually very different questions. So can I invite you to go into a couple of breakout rooms, have those conversations about those, and record your thoughts anonymously in Mentimeter, and then we'll look at all of those results together in a word cloud. Any other questions before we go? No? I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back, everybody. Before we show the word cloud from those questions, how did people find that? What came out for you in that conversation?
Some similarities.
Mm-hmm.
In some places, that there was what gets you out of bed at night was some of the wording that was used in the what keeps you at the place that you work at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything particular you would like to share, Sarah?
For me, it was the making a difference. I like to get out of bed because I'm going to go make a difference. I believe I'm going to go and make a difference. And the organisation that I work for give me the opportunities to make a difference.
Right. So you can see that link between your personal values and who you work for. Yeah. Super. Thank you. Anybody else want to share something that came up for them as that discussion?
Hi, it's Emma here.
Hello, Emma.
Yeah, we kind of had, we had a good discussion because there was a real mix of some of the things about kind of practicalities. We were saying about, actually there's some, necessities as well that need to be met in terms of actually I need to be working. I need to earn money to pay bills. There's some kind of very practical stuff going on, but also around, I guess, we talked about purpose, having a purpose. I said making a difference too, Sarah, by the way. But also around kind of well-being. There was a conversation we had around the need to be active and involved and working and keeping your mind alert to do those but also I was discussing about there being an exchange, so it kind of needed to be a fair exchange between employer and employee, both in terms of kind of what I'm giving and then what I'm getting back. Yeah, very much a kind of in line with what Sarah was saying around actually providing opportunities to meet your own kind of values and purpose. Same kind of thing. So it's a good discussion.
That's great, thank you. And interestingly, the kind of wording you're using doesn't exactly lend itself to a poster in the lobby, does it? No. But it's hugely important. It's something that sometimes organisations can't articulate, but we can absolutely articulate it for ourselves. And when we look around, we can see, yes, I'm getting it here. Yeah. And I can see where else I wouldn't get it, etc. Thanks very much, Emma. Anybody else from the conversations you've had?
Yeah, we had a good discussion on our team, and we're talking how often actually money is quite a low motivator, and it's more about having an impact on somebody else, whether that's a client or whether it's within the organisation. Jakub was talking about actually I just enjoy being part of a team. It's a young team and enjoying seeing them progress, learning and develop. That's what gets him out of bed. Yeah. And just enjoying what we do and having a challenge. It's not the mundane, the boring of every day. It's always something different, new conversations and so on.
Yeah, fabulous. Thanks, Sue. Yeah, and it's interesting, the one about money. Like I said, sometimes money can feel like a dirty word. And I remember once running a program where we were talking about trying to work out what your top value was. And I'd taken some people through a questionnaire, and one guy had come out with security as his top value. And he was saying to me, no, it can't be right, can't be right. You know, he said, that's not what I'm about. He said, I tell you what it is, my wife's just had a baby, money is really important to us right now, a secure job, that's hugely important to us right now. That's what's influenced my thinking. And I said, well, just hold the thought, just hold the thought. And then we did an activity where we got people to look at their entire career history and what had made them stay in jobs, leave jobs, etc., etc. And he came back after that and he said, I've just realized that every single career choice I've ever made is about security. It's actually deep down in there, that sense of, you know, being safe and keeping the people around me safe, and it's not just the newborn baby, etc. And it was a real eye-opener for him that it was so much more important to him that he'd realized it had driven so many of his decisions. But it was that instant reaction of, no, it can't be money, because that's a dirty word. Actually, no, it's something much more fundamental. Now, Nathan, I believe you got a word cloud for us from those first. So these obviously it's still completely anonymous. It'd be really interesting to have a look at those if you can share them.
Of course.
So getting out of bed and making it to work, fun, paying the bills, and a lonely desire, difference, variety, giving a job, personal growth. Super. And can we have a look at the second question, please? Yes, yeah. As you say, there's a lot of similarity, but yet again, still, they can be very, very different questions for us to reflect on. Now, this might have started to come out in the discussions you've had, but my third question is, and some of you might have found this on the Mentimeter because it automatically allows you to go to the next question, is what aspect of your organization's talent strategy makes you stay at your organization? Some people have already started to put that in. If you haven't, you'd like to think about that question. What aspect of your organization's talent strategy makes you stay?
David, can I make a comment?
Please.
One of the things that actually, it might be part of this question, but also part of the last one around what makes you stay. We had a discussion in our group about the connection that you have with your leader, your manager, and how influential that can be, positively or negatively, about whether or not you stay.
Yeah.
I guess that impacts somewhat in here around, you know, when I'm thinking about, you know, I'm not sure I could necessarily articulate the talent strategy for an organization, but the kind of, I think the opportunities that are created and the relationship that you have with leaders and, you know, those kind of things are absolutely part and parcel of that, in terms of making us stay. But I don't think it's necessarily linked very clearly for me at the moment to a talent strategy.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to that, Emma. Any other thoughts on this question that I've posed? What aspects of your organization's talent strategy makes you stay? I kind of want to retain confidentiality, so I'm just going to say it, in that there might be some people feeling uncertain as to how to answer this because they're recognizing that their organization's talent strategy isn't actually that clear or not that specific. And therefore, it makes the question quite hard to answer. So it's a deliberately provocative question, because of course we have to, if we're going to answer this question, we have to ask ourselves, well, has my organisation got one? Do I know what it is? Do I understand it? And as Emma was just saying, is it the talent strategy that's making me stay? Or is it actually something else? Like, for example, it's a great example, people leave people. So is it actually, it's the person I work for that's making me stay at my organisation? Or is it another aspect of what my organisation does? Is it actually related to one of the last questions about what makes me get out of bed, what makes me stay? It's got nothing to do with the talent strategy. But I do think it's interesting that a lot of organisations don't, when they put a talent strategy together or try and enact it, don't think about that it's not the talent strategy itself, by itself, that will automatically make people stay.
Well, I experienced what they call a director's migration. And I remember, my previous jobs, when one director leaves, then 2-3 of his subordinates leaves as well. And you find out a few months later, they are working in the same place. They're going to the same place, working together. But they, especially I work in the projects, project management area. And this big major project come in, and people immediately get their own former colleagues because they know they can relate easily. Yeah. And I think that link is critical. And when you start digging and try to see what it really is, bonding these people together, and they move together if they value each other. And it's, regardless of the opportunities you get within your organization, when you have people to people link and value, they either stay or they stay together outside your organization.
Yeah, I think some of that comes down to trust as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yes, indeed.
Yeah, I want to work with the people I trust. How do I know that I trust you? Well, trust is something that builds up absolutely over time. I remember starting work with a new manager once, and she said, how do you like to be managed? And I said, well, I just like, to get on with stuff. I want you to trust me. And she just looked me in the eye and said, you'll have to earn that. And it was like, yeah, because it probably wasn't my best opening gambit with a new manager, say, you'll just have to trust me. But she was absolutely right. Until you start working, until you start doing something, I don't know if I can trust you. So trust is built. We could have a completely different conversation all about trust is. Again, hugely, hugely important to what makes people stay or what makes people band together. As you were saying, Dowd, about what might make people want to work together as a group. I'm all conscious of time, and I'm conscious we could continue this conversation. For me, what's important about these questions is around, has my organisation really thought about talent? Has my organisation thought about what people are going to value from a development programme? And to the points that you were making at the start, Sarah, you said about one of the risks is that when people go on a programme, they're sometimes seen as being away from the business, they're taken away from the business, and it's time away from the business. So for us, the apprenticeship absolutely has to be tightly linked to the organisation, to what's the reality in the context of the organisation, because right the way through the development programme on the apprentice, they should be contributing back to the business. What we don't want is for an organisation to see somebody as being taken away. We want to see them as, this is actually part of what your day job is, because you're actively contributing, and that's why we've got that strategic business plan at the end. And the comment you made, Jakub, about people can let go, they don't try so hard. Absolutely, that's why for us it's really crucial that the business is involved all the way through, so that if people are starting to detach for any reason, that we can pick that up and we can help support them in terms of why is that happening. And for us to absolutely leverage that challenge of, you can't let go of your organisation when you come on this, because everything you learn, you should be putting back in. So that's for us, that's one of our personal values that underpins this programme. I'm conscious I've probably taken up more time than Alistair had bargained for. So thank you very much for the conversation, and thank you for sharing all your thoughts with us. Please feel free to reach out to me either through here or on LinkedIn. if there's other questions or you want to continue any of the conversation that we've not had time for, but at this point, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to hand back to Alistair.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you for facilitating a really interesting and personal kind of session. I'll just sort of bring up some of the kind of design principles that we have worked across this project on, and they really sort of thread in to those kind of discussion points about collaboration, co-creation, both with external, employers, with a regulator, and that notion of kind of both committing to someone's development with time out of the job, focused on development, being a really sort of hidden but quite clear investment in that person's future. And I think we've heard, from several people about their values, their core kind of areas of focus, but also from the need for people and the interest in their ongoing development, and quite sort of risk tolerant attitudes to experimenting and experimenting with how they work and work with others. But also, we've talked about the organizational impact and interface, talent strategies, trying to reflect the needs for individuals, but for organizations, and that kind of necessary tension and need for partnership. And then this session itself is a good example of kind of a hybrid delivery and kind of dynamic in action. And it's really clear that that's now the kind of most modern sort of way of getting through to people. But I wanted to, bring Lauren into this discussion and hear from Aeon about their points of view around these points and that kind of values leadership approach. So I'll stop sharing and bring you into the discussion, Lauren, to kind of share your experience.
Great, thanks, Alistair. So it's good to be here today, and nice to see some fellow HR and L&D and talent professionals here on the call. So I've been asked to talk today by Alistair, as we've been recently working together with Cranfield to implement a new senior leader apprenticeship. So I think I've got about 10 minutes today, is that right, Alistair? About that. So I'm just going to talk briefly about, I guess, contextualizing it first by talking about our talent strategy and talking specifically about leadership development at Aeon. And then I will talk about why we valued the level 7 senior leader apprenticeship and why we chose to go down that route with Cranfield. And then I'll just finish off with a few insights from our practical experience of introducing that and what that's entailed, how long has it taken, and kind of first impressions as well from our learners. So hopefully that all sounds okay, and there should be a bit of time at the end, I think, for questions if there's anything that you want to ask. Okay, so firstly, Aeon's talent strategy. Well, for those of you that might not be familiar with Aeon, we are a global firm, global professional services firm, and we cover risk consulting, insurance, broking, investment consulting, wealth solutions, and health solutions. And to be honest, it's constantly growing. So the most important thing is that we're part of the knowledge economy. So really, we don't have a product as such, apart from it's people's brains. So because of that, learning and development is very, very important to us. And it was funny actually to hear David saying that he's sometimes heard from employers saying, as soon as you develop them, they'll leave. Because for us, if we don't develop them, they'll leave. And also, if we don't develop them, then we can't stay commercially viable, really, because we need people to keep leveling up and keep learning and adapting to the constantly changing environment that we're working in. Because not only is our environment always changing, but our client's environment is. So we're constantly having to identify skills gaps, reskill, retrain, So yeah, so it's an exciting place to work in talent, I guess, probably similar to where all of you work as well. So we're very keen on being able to attract and retain and engage the talent that we want, and being that employer of choice for our talent. So we found that it's really important for us to be able to have leading talent development offerings that we can give to our employees. And we find every year there's constantly high demand for it. We always have to do a kind of selection process to whittle it down. So so it's something that we focus on a lot and will continue to. So thinking about leadership development in particular, so for our workforce, with their technical skills, people tend to learn it on the job within their particular business area. But when it comes to leadership, quite often what happens is people get promoted into these leadership positions, which require a whole new set of skills, and they've actually never really had the chance to learn those skills at all. So it could be somebody who goes from being a cyber risk consultant to suddenly being head of a team and having to do P&Ls and set a strategy. And we realized that it's just not really fair, and it's not productive to just put people straight into those positions without some kind of leadership training. And we've got a global program which offers lots of different modules on various skills, but they tend to be really bite-sized. And what we wanted in the UK was something a lot longer duration, where we can really invest in our colleagues and really take some time to develop their leadership skills. And that's where the apprenticeship really came in. So we'd made this strategic choice to invest in our leaders, and the Apprenticeship Levy funds, using those was a fantastic opportunity for us, because it really fitted the bill for what we needed. So one of those longer term programs, clearly very cost effective for us because we'd already paid the money in any case. And we also felt that the apprenticeship structure was very well suited for leadership development, because it involves throughout practical application of the knowledge as you're going through. And as I'm sure everyone, we're all quite familiar with, when we're learning as adults, we need to be applying those skills, with the 70-20-10 model. And it's really not, the classroom-based learning is just the beginning. It's all about applying it and practicing it and getting feedback. So an apprenticeship is ideal for that. And that's the kind of structure that we wanted for our leadership development. So what we did is we built what we call internally our leadership pathway, and we took the level 3, the level 5 and the level 7 apprenticeships and introduced an offering at each of those levels, so that people right from quite early on in their career can start going from a team leader to a kind of larger team leader, and then up to the level 7 when you're a senior leader, and it's all becomes a lot more strategic. So as Cranfield University, we've been partnering with them just on that level 7 element. And we've had an MSc in strategic leadership in place for a while, and that's going really, really well. We're already seeing great payback from our learners in terms of the projects that they're doing, because they're doing the real life business projects in the company. But I won't talk about that too much for now, because we are focusing on the new program. But we really liked the MSc, but it is an incredibly significant investment for the leaders doing it and for the business, because it takes around 36 months. So when Alistair and the team came to us about this new apprenticeship, which is much shorter, I think around 15 to 18 months, that was really attractive to us, because it was at the level 7, so the same all the same knowledge, skills and behaviors that the leaders will be learning in the MSc, but it was in a kind of streamlined, practical format, which I guess kind of cut out the academic, well, not cut out the academic side, but it was less academic than the MSc. And I'm sure the Cranfield team is much better qualified than I am to explain the difference. But we were really, really excited anyway when we heard about that, because with the MSc, a lot of the the people we wanted to develop, a lot of them just said, you know what, we can't commit 3 years for personal circumstances reasons, they just couldn't. So yeah, so we were really excited about that. And so I'll talk now about all the different parts of that program that we find valuable and why we wanted to do it. So firstly, as I said, the length, it's quite achievable. 15 months is long. We wanted a long program, and it's long enough, I think, to get that real change and gives them a really good amount of time to develop skills. But it's not so long that it kind of forces most people to say, actually, I can't commit that much. We really value how the program is very flexible, and the way that we work with Cranfield is very much a very close partnership. So they have an organizational brief from us, and from working with us for a while, they really understand Aeon and kind of the language we use and the strategic initiatives and the mission of the organization. So even though it's an externally delivered program, the feedback that we've got and what we've been trying to achieve is it doesn't feel like it's generic. It feels like something that is meaningful, I guess, in the context of Aeon and Aeon's environment. So that's been incredibly important to us. And we've got a closed cohort as well. So everybody that's doing it is you know, Aeon colleagues, and that's been important to us as well. Even though I think, you know, there are obviously benefits from an open cohort that you could have, like learning from different companies and in your industry. We've opted for the closed approach. We really like as well that it does have that external accreditation with the CMI, because although as an employer, we're not really, you know, we don't really mind if our colleagues get that external accreditation or not. I don't think it helps us be more attractive to our clients as such, but mainly because the product we're selling is not related to management. For the learners themselves, they really found this part attractive, because a lot of them haven't done any learning since university, and the opportunity to get another kind of externally recognized qualification and some more letters after their name, they liked that. They really found that to be a good part of it. So we're pleased that we got the external accreditation parts sorted as well. Then another part of the program we really like is it focuses on whole person performance, and there's a health assessment and a heart rate variance element to it, where they wear heart rate monitors and they can look at their performance not only from an output point of view, but they can look at their physiological reactions to things and work on their stress levels and improving their performance through understanding their physiology. And Aeon is, it's got a health solutions arm to it, and there's a huge focus on employee well-being. So this was really good for us to be able to offer that to them. And we've already kicked off those sessions, and the feedback, I think one of the leaders said, wow, I can't believe that our employer is giving us the opportunity to do this. This is really cool. So, so that's gone down really well. And I haven't heard of any other provider that offers that. So I'm just checking. I made a few notes earlier. So I think that's probably about it with the list of reasons why we wanted to do this. But in general, I think we're expecting a high payback from the learners that are doing these programs, because it is quite a significant investment, even though it's shorter than the MSc, and even though it's funded by the levy, it's still, it's quite a sizable amount. So we are expecting a lot from our colleagues, but based on what we've seen from our MSc students, you do start to get payback straight away, both in their engagement and also in their development of other colleagues. So there's almost a bit of a ripple effect from educating this small group of leaders, and then you see that their teams then start to pick up on the improvements that their leads have made and learn from that. And so we've had feedbacks from the wider team saying that they've really found it useful, and in some cases we've we've had students that have done the MSc deliver bite-sized masterclasses to other leaders across the firm on some of the concepts that they've learned in their Cranfield tutorials. So that's been a really good way of kind of widening the impact as well. And we'll plan to do the same thing with the advanced diploma. So I think the last thing I'll talk about then is the practical side of how we've actually gone about launching this. So Alistair will maybe have to remind me of the exact timeframes, but it feels like it's all happened very quickly. So it was earlier this year really that we, or that I started working on it, as I only moved into my role kind of around April this year. And from there, we quite quickly produced a colleague guide and a manager guide, which were 2 documents that outlined the program, the benefits to the individuals, the benefits for the teams, what was required from them in terms of time, structure, the eligibility. And we sent those around the whole company, but via the HR business partners. And we got managers to nominate people through their mid-year talent review to say whether they, whether they would put them forward for this opportunity. We then did some information webinars that Alistair helped me to present, and we did one for colleagues and one for line managers. So we engaged the line managers right from the start, and we were very upfront with them about the amount of work this was going to be and what we needed from them. And so after that, I kind of made myself available for conversations with quite a lot of the learners, and just really tried to drive home that point about the time commitment as well. So that 20% off the job learning, because in our experience, whenever we've put into place apprenticeship programs, the biggest reason for anyone ever dropping out is just because they found they didn't have the time. It's not that they didn't enjoy the content or find it useful. So we've really, well, I really brought that point home with everyone, and hopefully they've all taken it on board. And we then, so I then, when people confirmed they wanted to do the program, I got the managers to send me an email confirming, as well as the colleague, to just continue to keep that engagement with the managers. And then after that, it all went very quickly, to be honest. We worked with Cranfield, they sent through all the dates of the modules, and they sent through, so we did a meet and greet session to kick off the program, which was really successful. And we had Cranfield put a brochure together with all the different learners and what they wanted out of the program and their leadership values. And then we did an orientation after that, and that was Nathan and Alistair, and they delivered a very detailed session. And now we're really just waiting to start the first module, and there's a lot of excitement from people. There's, I think the group really, they've enjoyed the first sessions and they just want to get started really. So yeah, in terms of working with Cranfield as well, like I said, we're a very close partnership. We talk every week. They're very proactive, and I'm not just saying this because they're on the call as well, but they're very proactive. They're always kind of coming up with ideas of, what about if we did this, or how do you think it would go down if we try that? And always offering, extra support and sessions. And yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly seamless, to be honest. And there's quite a large team of them, so there's always somebody there when you need it. They're very responsive, and yeah, I couldn't recommend them more highly, really. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the program develops as we go along, and we're very much intending to have another cohort as well, hopefully starting about a year after this one, and we can keep that going until the demand's saturated, really. So that's all I have to say, really. But if anybody's got any questions, or Alistair, Nathan, if there's anything else you want me to cover, just let me know.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you for telling the story and going through the different phases, because it's helpful to get those different lenses from strategy to implementation. We'll have a couple of minutes for any questions just before we close. I was just going to reference some of those practices that you talked through, Lauren, in terms of the sense of what's working And one of our other clients who sadly had COVID, has COVID now, so couldn't attend today. She put this so directly that I just loved it and thought I'd quote her. That obviously, you know, working with an exec ed provider, you know, the kind of the quality of delivery is very much assured. You know, that's what they specialize in doing. So it's very much more about, it's the how you do it that has the impact, and then how you embed the program really drives that OD kind of story and change. And Lauren, you've mentioned a couple of the kind of devices that we've used. One sort of device that certainly worked for Cranfield for some time and has seen some resurgence in the last year has been these discovery workshops. So using those with SLT teams, with the L&D community or HR business partners, to get people into a kind of dialogue. And today, you know, is really all about kind of doing that with you, you know, to get a discussion going, to have live Q&A, to navigate what is quite a technical sort of area, featuring compliance. You know, it really couldn't be better. And some of these kind of other themes that we used, you know, alongside our colleagues from Aeon, you know, really picking out the messages for learners, but also for line managers and their kind of need, what threatens them, what are their weaknesses, and really sort of surfacing, you know, also with line managers and learners together, where they need to work and co-create that experience together, what support they might need, and how that can be best used. And we're finding and have found, you know, working with Aeon, that this meet and greet session is an absolute essential, you know, in any type of hybrid delivery. You know, just getting humans together as we are now, understanding their values, their drivers and what they need, even and long before the program actually starts, adds an enormous amount of value and quality to the program, because you obviously work differently and work harder cognitively, but to make connections in this format. And so that's really why that has become the kind of staple of how the programs roll out. But I'll kind of just close really on, you know, some of these aspects of the checklist to this type of a program. As Lauren made the point, achievement is really important, and an outcome has been important from the start of the project to how important it is now. We're very much looking to work with obviously large organizations on this type of project, but open to, you know, consortia approaches, smaller groups, you know, coming from different organizations. And you see, you know, a lot of the same sort of notions that we've used about pace, flex, and addressing different populations to those that have previously engaged at master's level only. So we'll kind of call it a day there, but any questions for either Lauren or I or the team before we close? And thank you for your attendance. Anything that you want to ask just before we wrap?
Just a question from me to Lauren, if that's okay, Lauren. With regards to your cohort, what level of the organisation have you managed to get a cohort at?
Okay, I think I heard all of the questions. Sorry, my connection might have gone a bit funny there, but did you say what level of the organisation have we managed to get a cohort at? Yeah, okay, Alistair's nodding. So it's trying to think how I'd describe, because we've got our kind of internal bandings, but essentially it's senior leaders, so people who have got, so I guess people who have got that strategic leadership responsibility. So they will need to be, so they are the main decision maker for part of the business in terms of what the strategy is, and they have P&L responsibility, and they're responsible for kind of developing that strategy and making decisions in the organization. So that has actually been, so when we were going out, actually, that was something where we had a few people that didn't yet have that responsibility, but wanted it, and they wanted to do the program. And in one case, we managed to say, well, because it's an apprenticeship, you need to be actually using those knowledge, skills, and behaviours, and be able to evidence that in order to, in order to go through the program. So, in one of the cases, there was a bit of a gap in that team, and they were able to give her a promotion and say, yeah, you can go into this role. We think you're ready, and as part of it, we're going to support you by putting you on this program. But then in a couple of other cases, we've said, not yet. When you've gone into that role and you're actually demonstrating those skills, then that's the time for you to do this program. Just because it is so practical, it's not like you can't just read the book and pass. You have to actually be doing the skills. So I think the way we decided was we just looked at the apprenticeship standard online and looked at those knowledge, skills, and behaviours, and just said, is it suitable for that person, given what role they're in and where they are, or not? And that was how we made the decision.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. And I guess then you've got the level 5 to sort of come back on should that work for the individual as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very much sort of different horses, different courses, Sarah, different sectors. We're experiencing more of a kind of senior manager profile to the average learner, especially in kind of construction, retail, roles that are much more project led or portfolio led, rather than being, functional leaders per se. So there is quite a lot of flex even within the standard, to cover those senior managers up to functional or existing leaders.
Lovely.
Grant, well, any more questions before we break? And thank you, everyone, for kind of staying with us until the end. It's been a really good discussion. Anything before we close? Great stuff. Well, thank you to Lauren for coming on and telling your story. Thank you to everyone for staying on and hearing ours. And please do reach out for a further discussion or to explore anything you want to in due course.